Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about muscle twitch in skeletal muscle fibers. So remember, there are three different types of muscles. We have skeletal muscles, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. You should have already learned about the differences between those. Today we're going to really just be focusing on skeletal muscle fibers. And there's actually two different types of skeletal muscle fibers: slow twitch and fast twitch. Let's learn a little bit of background before we go too far. First of all, what is a muscle twitch? A muscle twitch is when you take one muscle fiber and you give it one stimulus with electricity. And you can see that if you give the stimulus here, there's this sort of latent period before contraction happens. Now, the muscle fiber isn't doing nothing at that time. We know what the muscle fiber is doing, right? We've talked about this. The sodium is rushing into the cell. It's depolarizing the cell. The action potential is traveling down the sarcolemma. It's diving into the T-tubule, causing voltage-gated channels on the SR to open, releasing calcium. Calcium is going to bind to troponin, and troponin is going to pull tropomyosin off of the myosin binding sites on actin. All of that stuff happens in this latent period. So it's not that nothing's happening, it's that all this stuff is happening before you actually get to the contraction period. The contraction period is when those myosin binding sites on actin are freed. So myosin binds to actin, does the power stroke, and then repeats, which is our cross-bridge cycling. That happens in the contraction period. If you only give one stimulus, you're going to get just a little bit of force. It's not enough to contract a whole muscle because remember, we have to keep myosin and actin repeating. So the repeat part isn't really happening in this single muscle twitch. To get actual contraction, we have to give repeated stimuli. So if you look at the bottom here, the first stimuli you give is going to get a little bit of contraction, a little bit of force. Actin and myosin will start to slide back apart. If you give another stimuli, something, either an electrical impulse or some acetylcholine, you will get more contraction, more force. And then actin and myosin might start to slide back apart again. As long as the stimuli comes before the muscle completely relaxes down to where the force is basically none, you're going to get added forces. We call that summation. Once you give more and more and more stimuli, you see how the stimuli are closer together here? We're going to get more and more summation, and that allows us to generate enough force to move the muscle. Now, at some point, if you give enough stimuli close enough together, the muscle can no longer increase its force. It is as contracted as it can be. And the word for that is tetanus. And you can't really do anything. No matter how much more stimuli you give, you will stay at that level of force. So remember, when we are adding stimuli together, that gives us this sort of summation of forces, which gives us enough force to contract the muscle. Okay, one more thing we have to talk about is a motor unit. Well, what is a motor unit? Motor unit is when you have one motor neuron. There's our motor neuron. And then we've got the terminal ends. You should remember this from chapter 4 when we talked about tissues. We have our dendrites, our cell body, our axon, and our terminal ends. And that's our motor neuron. And this motor unit is that motor neuron and all of the muscle fibers that it innervates. So each of these is an individual muscle fiber. And the one that I just drew had 4 little branches off of the axons, 4 little terminal ends. And so it's going to innervate or cause to contract, give electrical signals to 4 little muscle fibers. So in my drawing, we have 1 motor neuron and 4 muscle fibers, and that's 1 motor unit. Now, this is an unrealistically small motor unit. The smallest ones are in like your eye muscles, the ones that pull your eye from side to side. And a motor unit in your eye has 1 neuron and about 23 muscle fibers. But still, if you think about how small a muscle fiber is, this is 1 cell, right? A muscle fiber is a muscle cell. And so you only have 23 of them, and they're microscopic. And so these are tiny little motor units. The muscle in your leg, like the big muscles in the front of your legs, like the quads, you would probably have 1 neuron and about 1,000 muscle fibers in 1 motor unit. And you probably have many, many, many units in the actual muscle. So just because 1 motor unit has 1,000 muscle fibers, you might have 1,000 different motor units. And what this does is it allows you to activate all these muscle fibers at the same time, and maybe not the other ones. So you're not using every single muscle fiber in your leg every time you move your leg. And that's why they don't tire out so quickly. You can kind of take turns. It's almost like if the teacher calls on the same kid in class all the time, that kid might get tired of answering those questions. And so they spread it around a little bit. Think of that when you think about motor units. Now, going back to muscle twitch, not all of the muscle fibers take the same amount of time to do this muscle twitch. Some of them are much faster than others. So if we take a graph where we compare amount of contraction versus time, and we look at how long different fibers take to contract, we have 2 different types of muscle twitch fibers in your motor units. So this one here, you can see, is really quite fast. It's going to contract and relax in about 100 milliseconds. So fast twitch muscles have a lot of fast twitch fibers in it. So for example, in your eyes, these are very, very quick twitch fibers. They're going to move your eye really fast, and then they're going to get tired. So they're really strong and really fast, and then they're done. Whereas the slow twitch are a little bit different. Slow twitch would be something like your big, long leg muscles, or maybe the glutes. They take a while to contract. And when they do contract, they're not that powerful. And they stay contracted for a long, long time. Look at how slow the slow twitch ones contract. They don't get to full contraction till about there. By that time, the fast twitch fibers are already done. And this is why in your legs you have like 1,000 of these guys, because they're not very strong. Whereas in your eyes, you might only have 23 fibers in a motor unit. Let's take a look at what they look like. So if you look over here on the left-hand side, the slow twitch muscle fibers, remember these are the ones that contract slowly and relax slowly, are shown in a darker red. The fast twitch muscle fibers are kind of in a white or pink color on the screen. And you can see when you look at a muscle that not all of the muscle fibers are slow twitch or fast twitch. You have like 80%. So those big leg muscles that we talked about have about 80% slow twitch and about 20% fast twitch. Whereas in your eyes, you're going to have about 80% fast twitch, right? These little white ones, and about 20% slow twitch. So again, your muscles aren't 100% one or the other. They have different proportions of slow and fast twitch muscles. So what does this mean? So remember that anatomy influences physiology. The structure of something influences how it works. So the difference in these fast or slow twitch muscle fibers influence what they do and how they act. So slow twitch, we know are slow. That's why they're called slow twitch. They have a relatively weak force per fiber, which is why slow twitch muscles tend to have larger motor units. Like your legs, they have 1,000 fibers per motor unit. They have really high endurance because they're not going super, super fast. They can kind of keep going for a while. And again, because they're going for a long time, they need sort of constant ATP. So they're going to use cellular respiration to make ATP to power their contraction. Fast twitch muscles are fast, and they have a very strong force per muscle fiber, but they have very low endurance. So they're really strong, but they wear out really fast, which means that you don't use them for hours on end. So they're going to mostly just use ATP that's stored up. So imagine this, take your eyeballs and move them left and right and left and right and left and right. Do it like 10 times. Your eyes are really tired after doing that, right? They're not really meant to go back and forth really fast, really hard, really strongly for a long time. Whereas if I said to you, stand up and just stand there for 10 minutes, you would have no problem using your glutes and your other postural muscles because they can go for a long time. You can walk for a really long time, way faster than you can sort of twitch your eyes back and forth. Shh. So if we're going to use cellular respiration, we have to have a couple of things. The first thing we have to do is we need to have a good blood supply. So you're going to see a lot of capillaries and a lot of blood coming to slow twitch muscles. We're also going to have a lot of something called myoglobin. And myoglobin sounds a lot like hemoglobin, right? It's pretty similar. It's a pigment that stores oxygen. So you're going to see a lot of myoglobin in these slow twitch muscles. And remember, myoglobin, just like hemoglobin, is a dark red pigment. So it's going to make these slow twitch muscle fibers much darker. And we're also going to have a lot of glycogen. Remember, glycogen is the stored form of glucose. And we want to have a lot of glucose on hand because we're making ATP. What do we need for ATP? We need oxygen, we need glucose, we need blood to bring these things to the cells, and don't forget to carry away our CO2 waste. Now, fast twitch muscles are quite different. They're going to use stored ATP. So what don't they need? They don't need a huge blood supply. So they're low capillaries. They don't need a ton of oxygen. So they have low myoglobin. And they have low stored glycogen because, again, they don't really need it. They're going to use ATP, or we're going to use creatine phosphate, or we're going to do anaerobic respiration, which basically means we're just going to do the glycolysis part. So all of this means that these type of fibers are actually relatively pale. So remember, these ones are kind of dark because of the myoglobin, and the fast twitch muscles are pretty pale. So let's talk about something you already know. Let's talk about chickens, right? So when you look at the breast meat of chickens, we call that white meat, right? Why is it white? Well, chickens don't fly very well. They might fly for like 30 seconds to get to the top of the fence post, but they're not going to like take off and fly to like South America. So they don't really need a lot of endurance, but they need to be really, really fast and really, really strong to get this big old fat body to the top of the fence post. And so they're going to use their flying muscles, are going to have relatively low capillaries, low myoglobin, and low glucose or low glycogen. So that's why breast meat is considered white meat, whereas the leg muscles, chickens are standing around on their legs all day long, right? They are constantly moving around, pecking at stuff. And so those muscles are going to need to have high endurance. They're going to hold that chicken up all day long, and they're going to use cellular respiration. They have a lot of very large motor units, but they are slow twitch, which is why dark meat, the legs and the thighs, is really yummy. It looks dark. It has a good blood supply and lots of sugar in it. And why chicken breast is what you are forced to eat when you want to lose weight, because it has less calories and less fat and is lighter colored. Again, in humans, people that have a high proportion of slow twitch muscle fibers in their legs are going to be really well suited for long distance running, like marathons. This is because they've got all these slow twitch muscle fibers that are excellent at endurance. People that have a lot of fast twitch muscle fibers in their leg muscles are going to be better suited for something like sprinting, where you have to have a massive output of force, but it's over very quickly. Think about marathon runners, 26 miles. They can run and run and run and run and run. Whereas a sprinter might run 100 meters, maybe 200 meters. They're done in less than 9 seconds. Now, can you change what you have? So if you happen to be a person that has more slow twitch muscle fibers, can you train and become a fast twitch muscle fiber person? Well, no. Unfortunately, what you have is what you have. If you have more slow twitch muscle fibers, you are just going to be more likely to do well at long distance things like biking or running, long distance swimming. Whereas if you have more fast twitch muscle fibers, you are better suited for sprinting or weightlifting, things that require explosive output of force, but do not require the same kind of endurance as someone who runs a marathon. That's it for today. See you in class.